So welcome everyone. I'm Stephanie Hessler. I know I've met many of you already, and I'm the career advisor for students interested in consulting, finance, business, and entrepreneurship. And I want to welcome you today, especially on this super wet, snowy, cold day. And we will of course welcome people who might be coming in late because of classes and other activities. Today we are here to learn about Insight Days. This is a Prepare for Finance recruiting event. We have a student panel with us today. And the Insight and Diversity Days are a wonderful opportunity for Wellesley students to network, to learn more about finance, to visit companies, and to expand your knowledge generally. And by diversity, we mean that these are open to women, as well as students of Black and Hispanic heritage, as well as LGBT and veterans. We have today a wonderful panel who are generously sharing their time. Natalie Jin, Carisha Gillespie, Gina Scorpiniti, and we've got Lindsay Wu, who's going to be arriving a few minutes late. And they've all participated in these Insight and Diversity programs, as well as have had internships and continuing offers from these companies. So this is really a great opportunity for you to learn firsthand kind of how to get in the door at investment banks and financial institutions. Before we start the panel, I want to take a minute to just do a quick overview of finance. How many of you are first years? Okay, so some of this may be new to you, and I know I was in the business myself for many years in the investment business, and words like sell side and buy side can be a little bit confusing. I encourage all of you to look on Handshake. We have a resources section that has lots of information about what all the different types of companies are in finance and investment banks in particular. Now, many of the companies that are that offer these programs are really full-service financial service companies. They're not just investment banks. Like Bank of America and Citi, for example, have investment banking divisions, which includes sales and trading and investment banking and mergers and acquisitions. But they also have a credit card business and a commercial bank, right? So it can be a little complex and overwhelming. And I think that our students today are going to help to at least demystify what these Insight and Diversity Day programs are and how to go about applying. So I want to start with asking questions, and if each of you could then share your experience, and be sure also that you have questions to ask. Hold them toward the end, okay, if that's okay. But I really want you to use this opportunity to ask your questions. You're here with Wellesley students. They have been through this, and you're going to be following soon after in their footsteps. So definitely use the opportunity to ask lots of questions. So the first question is, if you could each give our audience here a kind of definition of what exactly are these Insight and Diversity Day programs at investment banks and financial firms. Natalie, you want to start?
Yeah, of course. So I'm going to be looking at my phone because I jotted down a couple of things I wanted to mention to you guys, but basically they're to help a lot of these big companies who don't necessarily come to Wellesley to do full recruiting to get kind of the cream of the crop or really top students that they would have, you know, maybe interviewed at other schools had they seen them because they're not on campus, right? And sometimes they do come on campus, but it's still another way to further their diversity efforts or their efforts to include people whom don't necessarily fit into the role of what you think an investment banker looks like. And these Insight Days, Diversity Days often come with a lot of networking. Sometimes they pair you off with a mentor, but it's really a good way for you to get to know the firm. And it's, you know, people say an interview is a way for a firm to get to know you, for you to get to know the firm, but really the power is on their end, right? But this Diversity Day or Insight Day is really for you to understand this is what banking is. They often have like information sessions for you to get to know, you know, these specific product groups or these specific, you know, sections a little better. And I know that Wellesley's Investment Society does a kind of like an Insight Day, and that's a good way for you to try to go through to an Insight Day.
She, I think, covered mostly everything. I would just probably add that you should definitely be yourself. I feel like a lot of times we get really overwhelmed and bogged down and feel like we need to have like a checklist of things to like study and reiterate, but I would say definitely more so than perhaps the interview. The Insight Day is really a time to show your personality, show who you are holistically as a person, and treat them as people too and not just workers. I think that you definitely appreciate that, and your personality will shine through and will make you like it's memorable, which is helpful for continuing the learning process.
Yeah, just like generally you guys have said, it's good. It's just mainly like a way for you to get to know the companies and for the companies to get to know you. And like the reason you apply to Insight Days is so they can like basically get a talented pool of candidates to get into their pipeline, both to convince you that their bank is like, or their company is the best company, and so that they know who you are and can like have you in their pipeline if you're like a talented candidate. Diversity Days, I feel like for banks function to give banks, because I think a lot of banks say like, I don't know, I've heard this for diverse candidates are just like, we just don't have the good resumes, you know, for diverse candidates. For example, a lot of hedge funds, there are not very many women, and for that recruiting, they're just like, we don't get good resumes from women. And so like diversity days are a way that these companies can get good, talented, diverse candidates in their recruiting pipeline. So yeah, and you don't have to come into them knowing exactly what you want to do with the company. The point is for you to get to know the company, like different divisions, and for the company to get to know you so that you can see if you're like a good fit.
Oh yeah, and one more thing is that oftentimes after Diversity Day, depending on how selective it is, you are kind of guaranteed like a first round interview, and it depends depending on various firms with various Diversity Days, but I know some of them give you an automatic super day, some of them give you an automatic first round, but some of them it's just a good way to get to know the firm or for the firm to get to know you.
Actually, on that note, Natalie, or all of you actually, could you just break down what's kind of that first interview like, and what's a super day?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's been a year since I've recruited, but a first round interview is it's casual, but you're still excited about it. It's most of the time conducted either through a webcam, so this was, I think, implemented in 2015, and I think Golden was the first one to have done so. But it's an online interview, and you just have to explain like why you want to do this job. They'll ask you a couple of questions, and for some firms you get to re-record yourself. For other firms you have to just do it on the spot. And it's a way for them to screen through a lot of candidates really quickly and still see how well you do interpersonally, because they can see your face on the other screen. For some firms that are maybe less tech savvy or don't want to buy into this program, they just do like a really quick phone call. But those are basically the two main first round interviews that I've ever done. A super day is a whole new level. It's when they think you're worth it. They fly you out, you live at a cool hotel, probably in like Midtown, New York, or maybe downtown. And they basically have you do like back-to-back interviews. And I'm sure you guys, you probably know this a lot better because you probably just went through this, but it's pretty stressful. You get to meet a whole bunch of people at the same time, and depending on how big the firm is, you get to meet like, different parts or different densities of people at the firm.
To add to that, I would definitely say there's kind of a strategy for preparing for the two different interviews. I would say for the most part, at least in my experience, the first interview is more a personality fit, just kind of your competency and how you just communicate with a professional. The super days seem to be like way more technical, definitely a little bit of more of a personality, but you're going to speak to people who tend to be higher up in the company and want to see how well you can actually perform and if you're really a right fit for whatever division you are interviewing for. So I think that's a key difference for strategizing how to prepare for that timeline.
Yeah, I mean that basically covers it. Like first round's phone or webcam. Although I've had a first round that was in person, which is weird. Or like a personality quiz and then in person, I don't know. And then second round is, there can be rounds in between, like you could have another phone call or something, but yeah, after the phone call or webcam you have the super day, which is just like 3 interviews in a row usually. And yeah, they are usually more behavioral, the first rounds are, and I mean, sometimes you still, either way though, like you want to have a really good grasp of your story and like who you are, because like the first question they always ask you is like, tell me about yourself. And so you want to be able, or walk me through your resume. So having a really good answer to that question and preparing that for both interviews is a really good idea. Yeah, I think that's
So I'll just maybe jump in if, so on the applications that some of these deadlines are coming up, and for those of you who are interested in Bank of America, they've extended their deadline by a week to February 13th, and I think Citi is in March. So what exactly is the application like? So it includes the video, correct? Is there another part to the application?
For the program, for the diversity days? Okay.
Yeah.
I can say.
Sure.
I only went to one my freshman spring. I went to JP Morgan's like early advantage program, and I think the biggest part of that is like, and the reason that kind of happened is because I got lazy, because a lot of them are your freshman spring or your sophomore spring, but then I knew where I was working my sophomore fall, so then I just got lazy, and I should have, but I didn't. Anyways, but like basically, I think a really important part of the application is the essays. I feel like diversity or insight days have essays, either related to like who you are, or they can vary a lot. They can either be, and you guys could probably speak to this too, like they can either be diversity related, or just like a question about who you are. I don't remember what essay questions I got, but I think for the essay questions in general, it's good to like know a lot about yourself and know your story, because the applications for diversity days aren't really going to be they're not going to be technical at all, because you're not expected to know technical things going into it. The point of it is they're trying to get to know who you are, and for you to get to know the firm, and part of getting to know the firm, you're trying to figure out like which divisions you might be interested in. So like you're like maybe I like investment banking, maybe I like sales and trading, but you're not expected to then know like technical investment banking knowledge like for these applications. But so the more important part is like the more behavioral side of like knowing yourself and being able to answer those questions well. And that's kind of how that translates into the essays for it. Although I don't remember specific essay questions I was given. You guys could probably speak to that better.
I don't remember exact questions, but they're definitely like, tell me how like diversity is an asset, or tell me about experience that you think would be beneficial. And I think the biggest thing that I learned throughout this process, we go to a liberal arts college clearly, so I think the writing that we do here at Wellesley is definitely different from the writing that they would want or expect in a finance interview or application process. So I definitely just be concise, be short, and just get to the point.
And Carisha, if I remember correctly, you applied to a lot of programs, didn't you?
I did.
Can you talk a little bit about that and where you ended up going?
Yeah, so I did a range. I wasn't necessarily sure if I wanted to do investment banking, so I did a lot of like private equity. I did asset management, research, equity, and like private banking, or investment banking. So they all kind of were similar, because at the end of the day, finance is just an industry that's looking to diversify as a whole. So I would definitely say like use the same strategy for each and every company that you go to. In terms of me doing like a big volume, it was definitely like overwhelming, but just stay organized, just do what you do to stay on top of your work at Wellesley, and you'll do well. Just stay organized and be consistent, I think, are the two biggest tips I have.
Yeah, good. And so once you were actually at the Insight Days, right, tell us a little bit about what actually happens. And welcome, Lindsay. Thank you for being here. Tell us what actually happens at Insight Days. If Natalie, maybe you want to start.
Yeah, so I've been, it's really been a while, because they mostly happen your first year and your sophomore year, but I think just off the bat, the most memorable ones that I've been to, the ones that really swayed me into thinking about their company, were this McKinsey Insight Day and this Blackstone Insight Day, which is ultimately how I ended with my job my senior year. But they both happened my first year, maybe sophomore year. But again, like I kind of knew by sophomore fall where I was going to go, so I kind of got lazy my sophomore spring. But during those Insight Days, the general structure across private equity, banking, or even consulting is pretty much the same. You go in for a breakfast, they fly you out maybe the night before, and you go in for a breakfast where you get to meet people, hear their senior speakers, and then you break off into different groups where they go and explain to you what they do, so the different departments. So at Blackstone, it could be like the real estate group tells you something, and then you meet the private equity group, and then you meet the multi-asset investing group. And at that point, I also met the M&A group, and then for McKinsey, it was like, let's go through a case study, and let me show you what that's like. And it's a pretty long day, honestly. Most of the time, it's like 9 to 5, and then afterwards, you have kind of a night reception where oftentimes a lot of senior people come in. So I remember I met Ken Kaplan my first year, and he's the CIO of Blackstone. And that was a really cool experience because like as a first year, this isn't exactly the kind of people you thought you'd meet. So always definitely put your best foot forward, be professional even though you're young, and people know that you're young, but still like act like as if you're a little older. And definitely bring things that are interesting that you find about the firm, or interesting people you want to meet, and kind of have that on your agenda so when you're there, you can have really meaningful discussions and have, make meaningful connections with the people that you see there. But yeah.
That's totally on point. I definitely would say as a liberal arts college, I think for a student, I think it's easy for us to feel like we're like at a disadvantage, but I think these insight days are perfect opportunities for us to use our like qualitative skills, which are definitely, I think, under appreciated. These times are definitely great times to kind of just show who you are and show interest in learning about the company or whatever given speaker that you are meeting. So if you do get a list of people who you will meet prior to the event, I would just do a little research. Don't be aggressive and like list your entire resume, because that, I think you could overwork yourself and that will be bad, but then you could come underprepared and that's also bad. So just kind of stay in the middle, and that's like the best way to go for it.
Yeah, in terms of the structure of the Insight Days, generally like when, and sometimes I guess like I flew out and they'll like put you in a hotel, sometimes they won't. It just depends on the Insight Day. But a lot of times you'll start with speakers like from different areas of the firm, like telling you about what they do, because the point is they're trying to both convince you to work at that firm or to like that firm by kind of having you get to know the different divisions and get to know the culture of the firm by like hearing people speak. But also, yeah, it helps you to get to know or to figure out what division you might be interested in doing, because if you hear people talk from like investment banking and sales and trading and like technology, then maybe you can try to figure out where you fit best. So yeah, the first part's generally you hear different speakers ranging from like junior people like analysts all the way up to MDs from different divisions. And then you usually have a networking portion where you meet different people in the firm. At the specific one I went to, there were like, I remember there being like investment banking people were in one section, and then there were sales and trading people. So like the networking was broken up by division, and you could kind of just go to whoever you wanted to talk to. So an important thing for these days is to like have questions prepared, like Google like questions you'd ask to like a trader or something like that. Like before you do that, first go to the website of the company and stalk the company. Like go to the company's website, read the descriptions for every division so you can like know both what you might be interested in, but also like how the firm works and the structure of the firm in general, so that like if you hear a speaker speaking from a division, you're not like clueless about what that person does. And so that when you go to the networking portion, you can be more like focused in what you're doing. So for me, when I went to like the diversity day, I knew I was interested in investment banking, so I just talked to like the investment banking people. But I wouldn't recommend that. Like you should go talk to like the investment banking people, and you should go talk to like the people in the finance group and in like the trading groups or like sales and trading, so you can get an idea of what you want to do. So yeah, bring questions. Do your research on the company. Bring questions to ask during the networking section for different types of people, and also like stay up to date on current events so you can have things to talk about if they ask about current. Like I just feel like having a knowledge of current events, like before I have any interview or go to any diversity day, I always look up like where things are trading, and also like even though I wasn't in sales, like gonna do sales and trading, I always just looked up like where's oil right now and why, and then also just read the news, like recent finance news, which you don't have to get I think Wellesley has a Wall Street Journal subscription, but you can also use like podcasts, other finance like news sites. You don't have to use Wall Street Journal. Yeah.
I'm Lindsay, by the way. I'm a senior, and I did an internship this summer in sales and trading, and I'm going back full time. But the summer before that, I was in private equity, so there was a period of time where I like considered dabbling in investment banking. So I'm actually taking a little bit of a different perspective from probably what you've already been hearing. So as I just like kind of mentioned, my internship processes throughout college have more been like a navigation of me trying things out, seeing what I like and what I don't like. And I actually didn't decide to go into finance until my sophomore year. My first year, I did an internship at a law firm. I like wanted to be a lawyer, and I actually like came to the game a little late. So one thing I will say about Insight Days is like I actually, as Natalie said, a lot of them are during your first year and your sophomore year. So for me, like deciding to join finance late, I didn't really do that many insight days. I actually only did one. And so it was an extremely valuable experience, and like, but I also want to put it out there that like, if you guys are early applying, or if you're joining late and like you don't get into insight days, because they are very competitive to get into as well, like, don't give up. Like, your shot's not over. There's still a lot of opportunities for you to like break into the industry later down the line. While they can be an extremely valuable and informative experience, and they also can kind of get you in the pipeline for the recruiting process later in the year, there are also a lot of other things that you can do that like are in your means of control that you can still utilize in order to like get yourself an opportunity in the industry. And then with that being said, I completely agree with everything that was said before me. It's very important to continue to be professional, regardless of like, you know, what time of the day it is, whether you think it's a formal or informal event. Something that I like to tell aspiring people in the industry is that if you, whenever you're interacting with anyone, like, think of it as an informal interview, like whether, because the way that you present yourself should resonate with who you are, and if you are a good fit for the company, a good fit for the position, that should be something that's emulated in your interactions every day. And that being said, definitely do your research, because again, like, when you go to these insight days, it's very valuable, because these people that are very experienced, very senior, have a lot of wisdom to share with you, are taking valuable time out of their day to educate you and to inform you and to answer questions for you, because they care about the talent that will be entering their firm. And so in order to be really respectful of their time, I do think it's like extremely important to do your research before you get there. Something I always like to say is to try not to ask questions to people at the firm that you could easily Google. Just because like there is a fine balance between like, I want to like, you know, be interested and engaged, and I want to be engaging in dialogue with you, but also like make sure that these are questions that you can only receive from this person that has the experience that they do and has the wisdom that they do, and not like, what's the difference between sales and trading and investment banking? Because something like that is, quite frankly, like a waste of their time. They don't need to, a senior person and managing director at the firm doesn't need to take the time out of their night to tell you information that you can Google. And touching off of something Carisha said, from a liberal arts school, I think like we are no disadvantage in the recruiting game. There might be things that you didn't learn in a finance class, but everything that I learned for my recruiting all is available openly on the internet for free. So I think that, like, you know, take your initiative, do your research, and just be respectful of everybody there.
Did anyone have something else to say? Okay. So on the subject of networking with senior people, I often get questions, especially from underclass women, about how potentially intimidating that is. Okay, right? So can any of you maybe give an example, one of you or all of you, of kind of a more sophisticated type of question that you might ask based on your research?
I can start, but I'm sure everybody has something to add. I mean, one of my like go-tos is asking them about their experiences, because that's something that you will learn a lot from. That's something that you can't Google, and that's something that everyone likes to talk about. Like, they like to share about their own experiences, and like, for example, you might learn about a career path that isn't necessarily undergrad straight into finance and then grad school and then back into finance. Like, there are a lot of different paths. A lot of people have worked in economics, or they worked in chemical engineering, and like all sorts of different interdisciplinary tracks can lead you down to like being at a sell-side bank. So I always think that's really interesting, and also like that might even open your eyes to opportunities that you didn't even know about. So just like from personal experience, when I was a sophomore and I was doing my internship in private equity, I remember talking to somebody about their experience going from banking to sales and trading. And I didn't know very much about sales and trading, but when they were talking about it, they were telling me about like what types of personality fits are better for sales and trading, what the day-to-day looks like as opposed to what it would be in investment banking, and why they personally felt like they were a better fit in sales and trading. And I like absolutely resonated with it, and I was like, wow, like I never even thought about that before, but let me go look into it. And I did, and I thought it was a great fit. And so obviously that was something that I ended up pursuing. But I think questions like that, like not only can be really just like interesting to learn about, but also they can be really informative in helping you figure out how you want to navigate your career trajectory. Because like, again, for most people, it's not going to be linear. You're going to try things out, you're going to like some things, you're going to not like some things, and it's going to help you decide what you want to do in the next step. And the most efficient way to learn is by learning from other people's stories.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think like learning about people's experiences, especially like senior people, because you don't want to ask them. The thing you don't want to ask senior people is like recruiting questions. Like they have been out of the recruiting game for a pretty long time typically. So like don't ask them questions about the recruiting process. Those are questions for like junior people. But for me, I think like, I don't know, I have one specific example in mind where I was talking to, I think an MD at Goldman? I don't remember. I think she's an MD.
Which is a managing director.
Yeah, a managing director, which is like the highest level, or like partner, but anyways, it's like one of the highest levels. And I Googled her and found a deal she had worked on. So I asked her questions to like, as a way to learn, and also the division she's in is like kind of niche-y. So I basically Googled her, found a deal she was on, looked into that deal, and then asked her specific questions about that deal. And her thought process, like working on that deal, to kind of both like, because people also like to talk about their work, but also to get an idea of what her division does. So she's in like structured finance, and that's kind of like a very specific like product group, or like they raise money for companies in a very they raise money for very specific companies in a very specific way. That's what I mean by it being kind of niche-y. And you can't easily Google that, I guess. So asking her, but I was going to be like, what's structured finance? Because like that's kind of a basic question, and I could Google that and find like information on the Goldman website about that. So like finding a deal or seeing something specific to the person is more of like an ideal way to go about figuring out what structured finance is without being like. But yeah, so if you can, if it's a phone call, like you can't really do this before diversity days, like you're not going to necessarily know everyone you're going to talk to, but ideally if you can like research the person beforehand, that's ideal. You could also look into deals a company has done recently, like so if you are going to like a JP Morgan Insight Day and you see that JP Morgan recently worked on this deal, if you meet someone who's like like this consumer deal, if you meet someone in consumer investment banking, you could bring that up as well, even if they didn't work on that deal specifically. I don't know. So just like having some specifics is good, and researching the person as well. So.
I think I forgot to mention, I think this is important, sorry. Another thing is like, as Gina mentioned, there will be words, there will be terms, there will be groups that you don't know what they mean. Like, it's okay if like you don't know the difference between, you know, private equity, venture capital, investment banking, sales and trading. Those are all like, those are things that you'll learn over time, also by talking to people that are in those roles. So it can be overwhelming in the beginning, but I think a good rule of thumb is if you are ever at an info session or at an insight day and you hear about these people saying like, oh, I worked in structured finance, and you don't really know what that is, just write it down and look it up, and then the next time you hear it, maybe you're like, oh, I looked that up once, but I don't remember exactly what it is. You can write it down again, look it up again, you're like, oh, now I got it, and over time you'll start to really build that vocabulary. There's a lot of jargon in finance. It will take a while, but like the more you talk to people that can give like concrete examples like of exactly what they did when they were in that group, that you'll start to pick that up. So don't let it overwhelm you if you don't necessarily understand all the jargon that is being thrown around at these info sessions the first time.
I definitely agree with what's been said, but for me at the early stages, what's been more helpful has been, again, what Lindsay was talking about earlier about the experience. A lot of times, again, as Natalie said earlier, these people are going to present to themselves. They're going to say, hi, I'm Carisha, I've been at the firm for 20 years, etc., blah, blah, blah. And then I'll always just like notate, you know, some key things. Oh, they started out in whatever groups and they progressed and now they're the MD. And then when you go into those network recession parts, I would go and say, hi, I'm Karisha, I remember you said you were here for 20 years, like what has been some of the key things that's kept you here at the firm for this long? At the end of the day, if you go, like I said, I did go to a lot of different insight days, they all kind of start to sound the same. Everyone says the same thing. We want diversity, we believe in work-life balance. They're just trying to speak to us. Everyone's literally going to say the same exact thing. So for me, the insight days, which was try to figure out what made this firm truly different, and it's about, again, as Lindsay said, the experience and what makes this place unique. And it's not necessarily, at least in my perspective, not like the Excel pages that they're working on. It's those antidotes that they're willing to share with you. So get to know them through that way for me as well.
So after you're back at Wellesley, after an insight day, what happens after that?
You forget about them. No, I'm joking. You definitely want to follow up. Again, consistency is what's going to keep you in this game. Recruiting is not like a 1 week thing. It's not a month thing. It's like ongoing. Natalie probably recruited for 2 years. I still feel like I'm recruiting. It's just, until you sign your full-time contract, you're going to be in the recruiting process. So keep that in mind. So you just get the emails. I don't know, some people give you out booklets with their like email process and things like that. So you want to say thank you, have these emails be short and concise to the point, make it personable, share something specific that you talked about earlier. And yeah, I think those are kind of the keys for me.
Absolutely. So just what Karisha said, but maybe a little bit more than that. And just jumping back to our previous question about, how to tell what to say to senior people, I think, so you always get a different vibe from different kinds of senior people. Sometimes, like, they just are there because they want to meet young people, like, they haven't interacted with college kids since the previous class of summer interns, and they want to get to know you, right? And with those people, you can kind of tell, you ask them about, what's keeping them at the firm, what keeps them happy, what keeps them alive, and they'll talk about their kids and their wife and, how they're going to lateral into a hedge fund, and they'll really open up to you, and you can have that feeling. And I think those connections are so worth it, because then afterwards you'll message them, and that's how you create kind of like this mentorship experience after an insight day that's like supposed to be just informational. But then there are also times when you can really impress a senior person, like what Gina said, about by looking into specifically what they've done. But what you shouldn't do, and really, use your judgment on this, is like to someone who's just there for fun, to then have him or her talk about a deal that they worked on, like that's definitely a no-go, right? That's kind of like you doing extra work and sounding like a smart aleck about it. And then what you probably also shouldn't do is someone who's pretty stern looking, there to really recruit and find the top talent, and to be like, how's your day going, because that just seems unprofessional. So it's really using your discretion, maybe being more modest in the beginning, and then opening up to varying degrees depending on how they're reacting to your conversation. I think that level of emotional intelligence is really respected from a senior person viewing a younger person. And then the second question is what you do after your insight day. So definitely reach out, but you don't have to email every person you've ever spoken to at the firm. That just takes a lot of time. And also, if you do email a lot of people and you get burnt out and you kind of copy and paste the same email, what if they know each other, right? So that's just a downside with no upside. But if there are people you've actually had really deep, fulfilling interactions with, people who you just get along with really well, and you're not sure if you should email them or not, you definitely should. And even if it's for someone who isn't in the group that you want specifically, like, you don't have to be so practical. Like, it's always good to have mentors from different parts of, the firm. And so one of my best mentors was someone that I had met through an Inside Day, and she was in a totally different division, but ultimately, helped me land various interviews at the different other part of the division. So again, reach out to people you really care about, and really use like your emotional judgment to think about what level of professionalism that you need to exact yourself in at that moment.
Yeah, I think I'd say that. Did you have a question?
We're going to just wait to the end. If you could just hold that, that'd be great.
Okay. So I'd say, like, don't email everyone. Also, like, if there's a speaker that speaks to everyone and everyone emails that person's going to get like 100 emails, and like they're not going to go through every email, like, and that person might get annoyed. Like, I remember there was one speaker who was like, please everyone don't email me a thank you email after this, because those speakers who those speakers who at the beginning are, the introductory, like getting to know the firm, who speak to everyone who attends, you probably shouldn't email those people because you didn't really have a connection with them, you didn't talk to them about anything. But the people in the networking portion, or like at JP Morgan we had practice interviews. Like I remember I emailed a few people, like some of my practice interviewers, some of the people I talked to in the networking portion. It's like quality over quantity a bit. And because then you can, especially in those emails, you want to ideally reference something you talked about. So if you so you don't want to email everyone. And also like going off of, so like after the events happened, like I guess a brief anecdote, there was to reach off of Natalie's point of like not just emailing the people who are in your specific division. I think there was a person at JP Morgan, one of my interviewers, I emailed her, and she wasn't, I don't remember what division she was. Like she might have been in like technology, but she put me in touch with someone in HR at JP Morgan, who then put me in touch with someone who's an MD, a Wellesley alum at JP Morgan. So like it's like you can meet people through other people. Like your networking tree can like branch off. So like you don't have to start with people who are like in the division you think you want to be in. Like, and also talk to everyone because you don't know. You might want to do that division that person is in. So you might want to talk to them. But if you absolutely know like I don't want to do this division, then it can still help to be like I was really interested in what you were saying. I'm interested in this division. Do you know anyone? But like don't say it. If you're interested in like sending those emails, you want to be very grateful and very cautious of how you say that because you don't really want to like request something of someone if you barely know them. Like you have to balance that line, and like if you need help sending, you can ask me if you like want me to look over your email you're sending to someone, or you can ask like maybe ask Stephanie, or like but you should have someone read over those emails to see if you're gonna ask for something like that. But yeah, but after the Insight Days, it's great because we don't have a lot of Wellesley alums like at every bank. So these days or like every company. So these days are a really good way for you to network outside of just Wellesley alums, to like meet different people and get different experiences.
And I also think it's worth remembering, you know, Natalie hit it right on the head. You should really exercise your like EQ at these events, and that they're not looking for people that can read the room and be able to like go with the flow of a conversation because they're being mean or because, you know, they are being irritable. Like at the end of the day, finance is a very client-facing industry, and that's a skill that you'll need to use for the rest of your career. You'll have to speak with clients, and you'll have to determine what level of professionalism or what level of friendliness that is appropriate for the conversation, and there is no rule book to that. There's no handbook or right or wrong. There's simply like using our best judgment. It's so much common sense. It is so much just emotional intelligence, and that's not something that should necessarily be intimidating. It should be something that should be a skill that you guys are honing and that you guys are really emulating, that proves that you are going to be a good candidate in this industry, because at the end of the day, that's something that's used day to day, regardless of what part of the bank that you're in. And when I was interning at Goldman this summer, I was actually on a team where there was another intern who did send 2 people on my team the same email, like verbatim. And they did compare them, and they sit right next to each other, and they looked over and they're like, oh my god, I got the exact same email, and you know, like that obviously reflects poorly. So like anecdotally, like that's definitely something you want to avoid.
Good. So yeah, I'm just looking at the clock, and I do want to have enough time for questions. So why don't we open it up now for questions? I do have one last question that I'll bring up before we end. But any of your questions, and this is a great place for you to ask whatever is on your mind about Insight or Diversity Days. So don't hesitate.
Okay, speaking on to mentorship, how do you subtly like ask someone to be your mentor or build that relationship? Because you know, like when you're following with someone, you follow up like once a semester or something. So how do you, without explicitly saying like, I want you to guide my career, but how do you build that bond, like while, you know, being personable while also professional?
Something that like I think is a really good rule of thumb is this kind of falls into like the EQ category, but if you just met someone on the street, you wouldn't necessarily ask them for a favor. It's when you guys actually like just when you let's say you meet someone, you guys talk about something really interesting about, you know, an anecdote, for example, for me, an anecdote about how when I was little, I remember when my family first moved to New Jersey, oil was 99 cents per gallon. And you guys are all going to steal the story. And when I, was recruiting, oil at the time was like $3.84 a gallon or something like that. And I was talking with an interviewer about how that was just something that I had never really understood. Is it good or bad when the price of oil rises? Who benefits, who's harmed? And we had a very interesting conversation about that. And so then, if you guys follow the news, you may know that oil prices have dropped significantly. They've been fluctuating a lot, and so that was something a Wall Street Journal article that I sent to that person and said I saw this article. It reminded me of that conversation that we had, and how are you doing? This is how my semester has been. And it's having that relationship over time established before you ask what do you, I'm in this crossroads, how do you have any advice from your personal experience of how I should approach this situation, or just basically before you ask any favors, showing that I've actually invested time in our relationship. I value your opinion, and I have kept you in touch with my recruiting prospects over time. And therefore, me asking you this favors because I respect your opinion and I admire you, not I am, just asking everyone for favors. Because I think that there is that fine line, and it's going to be challenging throughout the rest of your career. But definitely using as much just emotional intelligence as you can to gauge what is this person like and how willing are they to help me.
Right. These things will kind of happen naturally. Say you go to the Insight Day, you find someone that you really like, you send your little thank you note, and then later on you're invited to go back for some pre-summer spring or something. You just shoot them, hi, I hope your semester has been going, or I hope all is well with you. I'm going to be in the office in 2 weeks for X program. It would be great to see you, yes, whatever. So it could just be like that, and then maybe they'll say, yes, let's grab coffee, and then you'll just kind of update on yourself, and you'll send another thank you note, and you'll just kind of naturally build these relationships. It's not necessarily something you ever write on a Google sheet, this person is going to be my mentor in 2 months. It just evolves, and for me it's always been, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I don't come from a finance family, so it's always been, I'm at Wellesley, I'm super interested, but I don't necessarily know what I want to do. I want to hear about your experience, then they'll connect you with your friends, and then you'll keep them up to date. So it just works out.
Yeah, I think the most important thing, though, is expressing your gratitude for when they do respond to your email. I know I made the mistake as a first year of sending really long emails, telling them about my life, my goals, my dreams. And I mean, they're busy, they're not going to read them all, but sometimes they'll shoot you a response back, and when they do, they're really taking the time out of their day to help this really lost first year student. And so to always express gratitude and keep those relationships going, especially when they respond and you're oh, they didn't even read my fourth paragraph, section 3, but that's not the point, right? What they're doing is telling them they're open to establishing a relationship with you, and to really hold on to that. So even during Thanksgiving or something like that, I'll message some of my best mentors and let them know how I'm doing, happy Thanksgiving. One of our econ professors actually, I didn't know she does this, but Professor Olga actually sends out end of the year reports to everyone. Not it's an actual report, but she just updates people on how her life is, and encourages them to reach out to her as well. But definitely reach out to the people who have shown any sort of interest to you, any life on that planet, go for it. But also to show them a lot of gratitude and to keep that relationship going. It's so important. And now that sometimes I'm in the role of maybe as a mentor, it means a lot when people follow up with me after I give them, take an hour of my day to give them advice, and they kind of ghost me or disappear off the face of the planet. I'm what happened to you? How are you doing? I really care. I gave you an hour of my time to help you guide your life. So it means a lot when they then, send me Happy Thanksgiving or Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, here's how I'm doing, or just to follow up after the interview. That's so important, and that's really a way of you building your relationship together. It's definitely not formulaic.
Is there another question?
I couldn't agree more with Natalie. I think the gratitude afterwards, the recognition that someone has taken the time out of their day to go try to help you in some capacity when they didn't have to. That has been that's proved like very vital in my like mentorship relationships, definitely. And I agree with Natalie, like being kind of older in the crowd now, which is like weird because we're not that old. But like I definitely do feel that way as well. So I highly encourage that.
Yeah, and one, I guess, last note that I would say, and I keep mentioning emotional intelligence, but I'm like, maybe at this age where I suddenly realize, I'm just kidding, but I think having spent a couple of summers just in finance, like big tech, big companies, small companies, I've realized how important it is. Like, sometimes there are people who know a lot more than we do, but if we exercise a higher like emotional intelligence, you can actually accomplish a lot more. And that's something that, you know, people always say, but it took me a while to really understand that. And the rationale behind that is, like, we're all human, and if you were to put yourself in someone else's perspective in every interaction, like, say you're at this Insight Day and you had a really long day and you're the managing director, like, how would you feel if, you know, this first year student, like, yes, they're really excited, but then they, like, ask you something you really don't want to answer right now, like, what is private equity? And you're like, right, exactly. And we've all reiterated this, like, don't ask them those questions, don't ask them things you can Google. But if you were to put yourself in their shoes, and then like some, you know, 18-year-old person just asks you what you do after, you know, a 10-hour workday, after a glass of wine, like, is that really what you want to answer? Definitely not, right? So, like, to always be cognizant of that in every interaction that you have is so vital. And that's probably the best piece of advice I could ever give someone maybe starting out in the finance industry. Because as Lindsay said, it is super client-facing, and your ability to be able to act on the spot, to speak eloquently, that goes to a long way more than your ability to, like, you know, read off every line item in an income statement or something.
Actually, I'm so glad you brought up emotional intelligence, because I agree, I think that's really important. But on the subject of technical know-how and understanding, what do you feel is important or helpful for our participants here to know at a basic level to prepare for these events when it comes to finance and financial markets?
I think, like, as I said earlier, I think it's important for these events, like, for most of them, I mean, it's always good to over-prepare rather than under-prepare. Like, generally, I think for diversity days, the point is that you're getting to know the firm, so you don't have to know super technical things, but being really up-to-date with current events, also understanding the different divisions so that you don't have to ask what's the difference between investment banking and sales and trading. Like, you should come in knowing the divisions of the firm, and if it's kind of confusing, maybe talking to someone like one of us, or like an upperclassman who has maybe worked in one of those divisions who can kind of help you. But also, if you're meeting with an upperclassman, don't ask them what's the difference between investment banking and sales and trading. Like, don't ask upperclassmen things you could Google either. Like, our time is also valuable. Like, Google those things, and then if you have a question about, like, oh, like, I Googled it, like, show you've done your research. Oh, I Googled this, and I'm not sure what does this mean.
You need to understand that concept.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't understand something you researched, then obviously reach out to us and we will help you with that. But yeah, so I'd say, like, you don't have to have a lot of tech. Like, if you're talking to an investment banking person, you would not need to know, like, how to run through different, like, ways to value a company. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong in terms of other experiences you guys have had, because you guys have definitely gone to more Insight Days than I have, but in my personal experience, it's never been super technical. But if you are interested in a given division, like I was interested in investment banking, in my practice interview, an interviewer did ask me, like, you're interested in investment banking, like, what's a investment banking, like, merger or an acquisition that happened recently, like, can you talk about it? So if you are interested in a certain division and you express that, then you should know not super technical things, but, like, current events related things related to that division. So that's what I would say. Know the structure of the firm, maybe current events about the firm in general, like, not just current events in general, but also about the firm, if something happened with the firm recently. Those are all good things to know.
I would say that particularly for Insight Days, but this is actually applicable to both Insight Days and interviews, I think that coming from any variety of backgrounds or walks of life is, like, appropriate for being at those events. Especially now, banks are trying to recruit from a more diverse pocket of people, and so I definitely have seen personally people that maybe have very little technical background in finance, or even just people that excel at something that's completely unrelated to something you would expect to see at a sell-side bank. But at the end of the day, one thing that I think you always need to do is only say things that you can back up. And if you walk into an insight day and you say, I know nothing about finance, I am a biology major, and I always thought that I'd go to med school, and suddenly I met someone a month ago that worked in finance, and I was super interested and intrigued, and I decided to apply to this program just to learn, and I know nothing. No one's gonna be get out of here. They're gonna be oh, this person's open-minded and they want to learn. But if you walk in there, you literally know nothing, and you say, oh yeah, I've been interested in M&A my whole entire life, people might be tell me one thing that you've read recently about M&A, and you're gonna look like a doofus. So, and it's the same thing if you say, oh yeah, in that internship I did last year where you were actually just pushing paper and doing copying, and you say I did LBO models for that company, someone might be really? Tell me in, layman terms how an LBO model works, and then you're gonna definitely, it's gonna appear that you don't know what you're doing. So what I think is very valuable is if anything ever comes up and you don't know or you don't feel confident in that area, you don't need to speak about it as if you know. You guys are young. It's perfectly acceptable to be oh, well, I've been, I've done a lot of research, but I haven't quite come across that yet. But I definitely would love to take a look at it later, and then maybe we could talk about it after I've reviewed or studied that on my own or something like that. That's perfectly okay. You guys aren't going to be expected to know everything, but just don't pretend that you know anything that you don't know, and don't pretend to be interested in anything that you're not interested in, because people will ask you about these things, and you just better have an answer to back up whatever claims that you're making at these insight days and at interviews.
Good, okay. So I did want to end on time, but I want one more question, if you could each give a brief response for this, which is, what's the #1 piece of advice you want to give at this point, if you think of your full experience recruiting?
I think I already just said mine, which is emotional intelligence, but then Stephanie brought a great point, which is you do want to have your technical acumen, especially if you want to do something a little bit more technical. Investment banking is pretty technical. You should know accounting, or at least a little bit of accounting, to go through the interviews and then to land your first day on the job. Even though you're not always constantly tested like an accountant would be, or you need to know exactly where everything belongs, but to have a general business framework and to be able to back it up. I can't emphasize the importance of what Lindsay said about backing things up and backing your logic up and being able to eloquently talk about, this is how I think about it. I might not know it, I might not have come up on this topic in my research, but here's how I would think about it. And no one's gonna ever fault you for how you think, right? As long as you mention that, you might not know, but you're still interested, and then to follow up after they ask you. So, maybe during an interview or during an insight day, someone's oh, where do you think interest rates are gonna go up after that after that Dow crash? Do you think interest rates are still gonna go up? And you're well, I've taken 102 or macro, but I'm not sure exactly what the Fed would be thinking about right now, or how important, the stock market would be for the Fed as an indicator. But, I'll follow up with you on that, or here's how I think about it. And then to make sure that, in the next 24 hours, to write a small report hey, after our conversation, I did a little bit of research, here's what I think, I'd love to hear your opinions on that. And that's another great way for you to network. So, combining that emotional intelligence with a little bit of your technical acumen, especially, I'm assuming a lot of you guys here are econ majors as well, so having that kind of technical skill, if you will, really bring you a long way, as long as you utilize it in the right way.
At this early stage, I would definitely say my advice is just to be very curious, very interested, and upbeat and consistent. Dress well, I hate to say it, but at this place you don't want to come with high heel stilettos and open-toe shoes. These are just easy things that people will look at and not necessarily give you brownie points for. Sometimes people were literally sleeping during a talk at an insight day that I was at, and HR's in the back just on their computer note-taking on how you do act. So definitely just present yourself and just be engaged, be very excited from the beginning till the end of the day.
Yeah, I think have a good attitude, and to go along with Kirsty said, be intellectually curious. I think what's driven me is just being curious about the finance industry. Like you're like, oh, this, like similarly, like I don't come from an area where finance is a career really, or like my parents didn't do it, I didn't know anything about it. So just like being curious about it, like Googling like what is investment banking, what is trading, what does the NASDAQ mean, like just Googling terms, like, and then that helps you, like that drive to just figure some things out. Or like when you read the news, like what do all these terms mean, I'm confused. And then that kind of like curiosity helps you figure out what you want to do, because the more you learn about the industry, the more you learn about like what different types of options there are and what things you might be interested in. And along with Googling, like talking to people is another way to do your research. Talking to upperclassmen is a good way to do your research. So, and then I guess going off of that, like know yourself and like just do a lot of introspecting. Like a lot of people here, I think at Wellesley don't like think about their classes and think about like, oh, I have to learn the technicals, but like learn yourself, like and like think about yourself and like what things do you like what classes do you like, what like gets you really like going in classes, like what readings do you want to read, you know, like thinking about who you are and trying to figure that out, like your background and things that interest you, combined with doing that research, I think is what gets you to be like passionate about certain areas of finance. I think a lot of people can go into finance for kind of the wrong reasons. Like I even talked to an analyst this summer, like a full-time analyst, who was like, oh yeah, like I just wanted to do investment banking at like Goldman Sachs because like it sounded prestigious and like blah blah blah. And like I don't know if he's super happy with where he is because of his reasoning, but if you kind of figure out who you are and what the position is, you're probably going to end up being happier where you are, instead of just chasing it for like money or like prestige and that sort of thing. So I don't know, that was just a jumbled mess of stuff, but there you go.
I can agree more with what Janine said. Actually, what I was going to say was be hardworking, be genuine, and like be true to yourself and those around you. And what I mean by that is you guys are still early in the stages. I have done several internships in finance now. I have seen firsthand experience. Like for example, over the summer I did see someone that, you know, was an analyst, had signed on for a 2-year commitment, pursued finance because they, you know, thought it sounded good, or because they fake, like don't fake it, because that hurts everyone, that helps no one. You know, that person spent 6 miserable months working in a job that they, you know, didn't enjoy because they like kind of faked their way in, as in they did everything that they thought sounded right, and they read online, what should I do, and then they did those things because they thought it was right and not because it was what they wanted. And at the end of the day, the team suffered because they had someone that wasn't genuinely passionate about the work, which meant that person didn't deliver the quality of work that they were expecting to get. And also that person was hurt because they spent 6 months of their lives doing something that they really did not enjoy doing, that they personally weren't good at. Their confidence suffered a lot, and at the end of those 6 months, that person decided to leave. And you know, at that story is sad, and that helps no one. And so like be genuine every step of the way. If you have a logical story of why you are here today, why you're at this diversity day, why you're at this interview or super day, it'll speak for itself. If you are interested and you're curious, that will be enough of a reason for someone to hire you. If you know what you're passionate about, you know what you're good at, and you work hard to be able to combine those things, that's something that I think is essential to like lifelong happiness. And like obviously I don't know that much, but I figured out that much. You want to definitely be doing something because you've introspected and you have tried your best efforts at figuring out what the criteria of the job that you're applying for entail, and that suits you. So that's the best advice that I could give.
And a lot of that comes with like, I was gonna say really fast, like doing internships is a good way to figure out what you like. Like your first internship, you might not like it at all, but like after you do an internship, or after maybe you have like a work experience on campus, if you didn't like it or if you liked it, either way, think about what things you liked or didn't like about it. And so you know, like what kind of work environment do I like? What kind of people do I like to work around? What type of work do I like to do? You know, like I'm like, oh, I loved working on Excel, and like I love looking at numbers on Excel, like that's how I am. And so and I knew that from a previous work experience I had, so just kind of get as many experiences as you can, like classes or maybe extracurriculars, or like, well, not as many as you
or even online, just on the internet.
like do your research to see like what kinds of things do I like and not like. Although balance is really good. Don't do everything because that's also not good. You'll overload yourself. Don't do that. But like be smart. Like I don't know. Like try a lot of different things and see what things you like. That's how you can know, because maybe you have an internship you don't like, but figure out why.
So we have time for one more comment. Did you have one more
Yeah,
comment?
so I think, you know, the general audience, to my knowledge, are like your first years. And I just wanted to say, like, don't give up. Even if you have reached out to a senior or a junior and they haven't responded to you, or, you know, they're too busy, they left you on red, you've been reaching out to a bunch of, you know, more senior people at these Insight Days and they still haven't gotten back to you, haven't gone your first rounds. Like, don't give up. Be confident in that this is what you want, if it is what you want, and to always put your best foot forward, not to be jaded so early. I know it's really easy to be like, oh, no one cares, but people do care. You just haven't met the people who cared in that very moment that you reached out. And I mean, that's why we're all here.
Busy. Maybe they like literally forgot to respond.
Exactly, and there's nothing wrong with being like, oh, hey, I just want to follow up with this, but not doing it like, you know, every 3 days, every 40 hours. Like I emailed you yesterday, but I wanted to follow up. Right, emotional intelligence, right? But to not give up. I mean, it's really I think there's a balance between in your first years and applying to these Insight Days, like true talent and your GPA, and just how it's just a luck game and a numbers game. So if you don't get this first year Insight Day, apply sophomore year. It's okay. Beef up your resume. Do something that will tell you a little bit more about yourself, so you get to learn about yourself a little bit more, and to always be confident and put your best foot forward. I think that's
Good.
relevant for our age group currently.
Well, thank you so much, all of you, for your generously sharing your time and your insights. Wouldn't you agree we've learned a ton from our panelists? And in addition to what we've learned this evening, especially for those of you who are new to finance, I encourage you to visit the resources section of Handshake. There's an entire section on finance, which I've put together. A lot of the material I've gathered from students, okay? So I really encourage you to go through that. Whenever I'm aware of Insight Days, I post them to a spreadsheet that's attached to that resource. In addition, if the companies don't post the events on Handshake, I'll go in and post them. I post as much as I can. I don't always hear anything, so if you hear of anything that isn't posted, definitely let me know. And one thing, especially for those of you who are first years, you can only have a one-page resume. No longer than 1 page. It's got to be 1 page. I'm going to stay here for the next half hour. If any of you have a resume you want me to review and critique, I'm happy to do that. But thank you so much for being here. This is a recorded event, so we're going to be posting it. I don't know exactly when it will be posted, but fairly soon. And thank you, everyone.
And also, thank you so much for Stephanie for setting this up. Like, you guys have so many resources at your, like, in your reach, and I just can't imagine how much easier my life would have been if I had all of these resources when I was a first year. So I hope you guys feel very fortunate for all the work that she's put in, because it is extremely helpful and valuable.
Take advantage. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.